Welcome to this explainer. Look, if you're anything like I used to be, you've probably set these massive, super ambitious goals only to find yourself completely overwhelmed a few weeks later. Well, today we are going to change that. I'm going to show you how adopting very specific, science-backed systems completely shifted my daily productivity. We're going to take those overwhelming, intimidating goals and turn them into highly manageable daily actions. Literally, the exact habits that made me smarter and completely transformed the way I work.
All right, let's jump right into the masterclass toolkit we're building today. We'll be covering 1. Systems over flawed goals. 2. The procrastination trap. 3. Hacking your activation energy. 4. Mastering focus with time. And finally, 5. Redesigning your environment.
Starting with Section 1, Systems over Flawed Goals. For a really long time, my absolute biggest mistake was obsessing over the finish line instead of the daily process actually required to get there. But consider the math behind what James Clear calls the aggregation of marginal gains. If you get just 1% better each day, that effort naturally compounds. By the end of a single year, you aren't just a little bit better, you are literally 37 times better. Fun fact here, this exact 1% compounding philosophy is how the British cycling team went from a century of total mediocrity to absolutely dominating the Olympics. Habits truly act as the compound interest of self-improvement. It really all boils down to this brilliant core philosophy. You do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. James Clear realized that if you're struggling to change a habit, failing to change isn't a personal flaw. You aren't broken. You simply have the wrong system for change. When you start falling in love with the process rather than the final product, you take all that heavy pressure off yourself and start actually making real progress.
So how do we actively frame these daily systems in our minds? Well, changing just one single word shifts your brain from viewing daily habits as heavy, exhausting burdens to seeing them as powerful opportunities. Instead of sighing and saying, "Oh, I have to wake up early," or "I have to study," you say, "I get to do this." It instantly rewires your perspective, transforming a draining obligation right into a positive advantage.
Moving on to Section 2, the procrastination trap. But hey, what happens when we inevitably face resistance to our new systems? Because procrastination, it isn't simply laziness. It's actually driven by deep feelings of overwhelm, perfectionism, and fear. We have all been there, slapping a later sticky note on a task, lying on the couch waiting for some magical surge of motivation that never actually arrives. We delay taking action because a task just feels way too complex, or maybe we fear failure, which honestly just leads to more frustration and wasted time. So there are actually 5 tiers of overcoming procrastination. The goal is to graduate from Tier 1, which is that constant firefighting and delaying things until the very last minute, all the way up to inner alignment at Tier 5. By building awareness, employing actual emotional strategy, and relying on our habits, you reach a point of self-sustaining, purpose-aligned action. Basically, you finally start running your day instead of letting your day run you. Which brings us to Section 3, hacking your activation energy. Okay, so how do we actually climb up those procrastination tiers? We have to conquer something called activation energy. That is the initial, massive mental and emotional friction required to just start. Think about it. Pushing a giant boulder is absolutely hardest at the very first inch. The absolute hardest part of any overwhelming project isn't the actual work, it's just overcoming this initial friction to begin in the first place. Because once you get going, momentum naturally takes over. An object in motion tends to stay in motion. To beat this, we can use Mel Robbins' incredibly effective 5-second rule. It's so simple. The exact moment you feel the impulse to act on a goal, you count backward out loud or in your head, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then go. You act immediately. This physical countdown keeps your mind focused and actively interrupts your brain's cycle of doubt before it even has the chance to talk you out of it. It literally forces your prefrontal cortex to release that activation energy and get moving. And we can actually pair that countdown with another super powerful psychological trick. The 5-minute rule dictates that if a task feels overwhelming, you just commit to doing it for 5 short minutes, making good habits incredibly easy to start. Conversely, the 20-second rule says we should actively add a 20-second delay to our bad habits. The crucial takeaway here is that we must remove friction to start positive tasks quickly, while intentionally throwing up roadblocks and delays for those zero-friction distractions, like mindlessly grabbing your phone to check social media.
All right, Section 4, Mastering Focus with Time.
Now that we know how to start, we need a highly reliable system to sustain our focus without completely burning out our limited willpower. Enter the Pomodoro technique. Developed by Francesco Cirillo, this time management philosophy uses a simple timer to essentially outsource your discipline. Fun fact for you, Pomodoro is Italian for tomato, and it was named after the literal kitchen timer Cirillo used back in university. Because human willpower is incredibly limited, putting the heavy burden of discipline onto an external timer keeps you fully accountable without draining your internal mental energy. Simply put, the timer doesn't get tired.
Here is exactly how a Pomodoro session works. First, you choose one task, just one. Second, set your timer for 25 minutes. Third, as you're working, write down any random distractions on a piece of scratch paper as they pop up into your brain. This keeps them out of your head without you actually acting on them. Finally, take a sweet 5-minute break. This systematically transforms an intimidating, endless-seeming project into a highly manageable 25-minute input. You aren't stressing about the massive output. You're just putting in the 25 minutes of input.
And finally, Section 5, redesigning your environment. So we've talked about starting and we've talked about focusing, but shaping your physical and digital surroundings is the ultimate secret sauce to making these smart habits permanent. It all boils down to the 4 laws of behavior change, which perfectly contrast how to seamlessly integrate good habits while systematically destroying bad ones. To create a good habit, you make it obvious, attractive, easy, and satisfying. But to break a bad habit, you do the exact opposite. You make it invisible, unattractive, difficult, and unsatisfying. If you want to study, leave your books wide open on the desk. If you want to stop mindless scrolling, plug your phone in across the room. Your environment is the invisible hand shaping your everyday behavior.
Which brings us to a challenge just for you. You now know the science of systems, you know about activation energy, and you understand environment design. So what is your gateway habit or 5-minute task going to be today? I challenge you to apply the 5-second or 5-minute rule immediately to a single task you have been dreading the absolute second this explainer ends. You now have the blueprint to build systems that make you smarter, more productive, and less stressed. So the only question left is, are you going to count down from 5 and finally start?